Aquinas, a 13th century philosopher, theorized the teleological argument, which was then popularized by William Paley in the 18th century. The teleological argument, or more commonly known as the intelligent design argument, theorizes how God exists.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Hebner.
And I'm Ursula Heesh.
And today we're going to be debating creation versus evolution, the logistics of the teleological argument and its weaknesses. For my side of the argument states that we are the product of intelligent design, the intelligent designer being God. I'm going to prove this argument to you with an analogy. Say you stumble upon a watch. The watch didn't just naturally occur. The complex mechanism keeping it functioning and giving it an exact purpose is the result of something designing it to make it function in the first place. There couldn't have possibly been something so complex that just occurred. There must be some higher power necessary being intercepting, and that's what the teleological argument states. That necessary being is God.
Your argument uses the false analogy fallacy, though. You're comparing two things because they have some similar traits, but in reality are incredibly dissimilar. This argument compares two things that differ too much in order to actually prove the point of the teleological argument. Another flaw in the argument is that you state we were created with such complexity and certain purpose, yet we can use things for purposes they were not intended for. Why can I use the tools I've been given for something else? Not to mention the fact that we as the species have major weaknesses. Why do I have those weaknesses? Why weren't we created with the perfect bodily structure to survive with ease, like being able to see in the dark or hear from a distance?
Because we don't need to. God has provided the tools necessary for our survival and nothing more. As well as it doesn't matter how it was created, whether that be a watch or a human, it just matters that it was created by something. You may not understand a lot of things in the world, like cars or airplanes, but that doesn't mean that they weren't created by something. Just because you don't understand it doesn't make it wrong.
Well, then what purpose do we have as humans? If I can't understand my complexity or what I am, then I can't understand what purpose I'm supposed to have on God's earth.
Just because you don't know the purposes of something doesn't mean it doesn't have one.
But there's another fallacy there. You're using the appeal to authority fallacy. You're only listening to what your version of God has to say rather than providing any irrefutable evidence because in your perspective, he's an omniscient, omnipotent God. You're using a priori knowledge to come to a conclusion and presenting it as facts. Your whole argument is to see God's purpose in the world, yet you're contradicting yourself and still following what God has to say. As well as, if I can't find purpose, I can just make purpose for anything, even if it's not specifically designed for that, because, well, nobody told me what exactly that purpose was for. I have to assume that if something was designed for a specific purpose and is also capable of doing something else, then that is also its purpose, even if it isn't, which goes against your idea of purpose. In adopting your argument, we also need to assume that an omnipotent, omnibenevolent God created me with purpose to have a poor reproductive system, teeth that can ruin my mouth structure, and systems in my body that can make me prone to illness. Why would God do that? A flawed world implies a flawed creator, which can't be Aquinas' definition of God.
Evolution just simply isn't a reasonable or factual theory for our existence. Your argument on the same note doesn't have any definitive evidence. You too have the same fallacy in that you're appealing to authority, purely because Darwin is a scientist. You also use the fallacy hypothesis contrary to the fact where you pass off a hypothetical scenario, the evolutionary theory in this case, as facts. Your disagreement with this analogy doesn't affect the fact that we are just simply too complex and perfect in order to pass off as an evolutionary fluke.
That's where you're wrong. We aren't perfect, as stated before.
Paley's creation argument states that God did in fact create everything, and he created it with purpose. The argument also states that humans have purpose, and therefore God created us.
If we look at Darwin's theory of evolution and the counter to Paley's argument, however, we can see that if God did exist, he did in fact create flawed beings, because we as a human species are flawed. Overall, there is no possible way to prove or disprove the existence of God.